Good afternoon, everyone. Please be seated. Our guest speaker for today, Shri Sudheendra ji Kulkarni, is here. So a warm welcome to him. And Professor V.N.R. Pillai, our beloved Vice Chancellor of the Somaiya Vidyavihar University. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Somaiya Public Lecture being organized today with our guest speaker, Shri Sudheendra ji Kulkarni. We all have been witness to certain developments that have been happening over the past few months, and we are really looking forward that many of these developments will be addressed to in this address. The most recent of them being the developments which happened in the Oval Office, and with Zelensky and Trump and Vance being involved, and how the contours of international politics have been changing, and perhaps the way it will be reflected going forward in the 21st century. Now, when we talk about the history of international relations, it has been often called to a point of cliche that perhaps 19th century has been the British century. The 20th century has been an American or the Russian century, depending on which perspective one looks at. And the 21st century has been stated to be the century for Asia. So this is the theme for today, considering the role that India will play in perhaps shaping a responsible world order for which Sudheendra ji Kulkarni is here. I'll request him to please come on the stage. And I'll also request Professor Pillai, Vice Chancellor of Somaiya Vidyavihar University, to accompany Shri Kulkarni to the stage. Thank you, sir. It has been a tradition on the Somaiya Vidyavihar campus that every public lecture and important event begins with two things. One is the lighting of the lamps, the diyas, followed by a prayer. I'll request the dignitaries on the dais to please proceed for lighting of the lamps. So, I'll also request Professor Devi to come on the stage. Thank you, sir. भारतीय परंपरा में दीप प्रज्वलित करने की एक अटूट परंपरा है जो सालों साल चलते आ रही है. So, thank you so much. I'll request everyone to kindly rise for the Somaiya campus prayer.
पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. ॐ ईशावास्यमिदं सर्वं यत् किञ्च जगत्यां जगत् तेन त्यक्तेन भुञ्जीता मा गृधस्तस्य स्विद्धनम् मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् ॐ प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजेभिर्वाजिनीवती वीणामविद्यवतु ॐ चोदयित्री सूनृतानां चेतन्ती सुमतीनां यज्ञं ददे सरस्वती ॐ असतो मा सत्समय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ॐ सहनावतु सहनौ भुनस्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै सर्वेऽत्र सुखिनः सन्तु सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति
Thank you, everyone. Now, the public lecture organized for today is something that we are all waiting for, but there are certain formalities. I'll not say formalities, but these are small gestures which are extremely important on our behalf. As a small gesture to our speaker and for taking time out for coming to interact with us, we have a token of our love and appreciation. I'll request Professor Pillai to please give this small token, a gesture from our part, to Shri Kulkarni. Thank you, sir. Before I request our Vice Chancellor, sir, to come and speak with us, I'll request Professor Ganesh Devi, the Director for School of Civilization Studies and Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, to come to the dais and say a few words.
Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Pillai, our eminent speaker today, Shri Sudheendra Kulkarni ji, Dr. Mrs. Kulkarni, all academic colleagues, students. The School of Civilization is a new creation of the Somaiya University. It is known as the Somaiya School of Civilization, and its purpose is to reinterpret the entire advent of human from the very beginning, maybe 20 lakh years before our time, till now, and to see how the world has arrived at this urban civilization and finds itself in a very rapidly changing situation which can confuse almost anybody. The world is changing not by the month or by the year, but by the minute now. And in that extremely volatile, extremely fluid world, how do we make a sense of our existence, who we are, from where we come, where we are going, what is the future of humanity? All those areas are covered under the School of Civilization. One of the purposes of the School of Civilization is to generate a new dialogue, a new conversation, not just in Bombay, but in India and outside India, if possible. And to that end, the school has been holding conferences and weekly public seminars and discussions. In lots of those conferences and seminars, lots of views get expressed, and sometimes rather than clarifying clearing the confusion, more confusion is created. At such times, we need to have words of wisdom, knowledgeable information, a new perspective from men and women of immense learning. And it is for that reason that this university thought of requesting Sri Sudheendra Kulkarni to come and speak to us. I mean, he has straddled the entire spectrum of perspectives, from left to right to center. But more than that, he is an extremely rare kind of intellectual whose exposure to things modern and things traditional, both together, is limitless. I have known him personally for quite some time. I have been reading his books and essays. He was first introduced to me, Professor Pillai, as an eminent Gandhian by one of the. He was introduced to me first as an eminent Gandhian by the Gandhian, the person among Gandhians whom I respected the most, that is Narayan Bhai Desai. He told me about how wonderfully you grasp Gandhi. And that's what made me curious to come and see Sudheendraji. And since then, we met several times and had exchanges in different contexts, different perspectives. I am absolutely thrilled that he's on this campus, and it is with utmost great expectations that I look forward to listening to your speech. I want to thank you on behalf of the School of Civilization for accepting this invitation and giving your time for being with us. Thank you indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Samir sir wanted to be here, but due to certain reasons, he could not be. So he has conveyed his best wishes, and he has said that he will listen to it on YouTube later. Yes. I'll request Honorable Vice Chancellor of Somaiya Vidyavihar University, Professor V.N.R. Pillai, to say a few words.
Professor Sudheendra Kulkarni, my colleagues from the university, Mrs. Kulkarni, other distinguished invitees, dear students, and other invited guests. I am extremely glad to have Professor Sudheendra Kulkarni today with us for delivering a lecture in the Somaiya Public Lecture Series. He has been introduced, and probably most of you may be knowing him also. I know him for the last, maybe in 2001 or 2002, I got introduced to him when I was in Delhi. He was working with the Prime Minister's office as well as the Home Minister, Mr. Advani's office, looking at different perspectives of probably governance, I do not know. Then, of course, I had occasion to read him. I had occasion to hear him. The most recent one was, I just read it was an article or a review of a book, The New Identity of Asia. It is a book or? It's a book. New Identity of Asia. Then, of course, I recollected my association with him, I thought of having him here for the public lecture and speaking about that particular thing towards us. It's very, of course, the relevance of it is mentioned by Professor Gadgil and Professor Devi. And this institution, of course, Mr. Sudheendra Kulkarni knows this institution much better than me. And Mr. Somaiya also knows Professor Sudheendra Kulkarni very well. In fact, we had decided for an earlier date for this lecture. To suit his convenience, we changed his day to day, but today also he had some very unavoidable urgent thing, and therefore he has requested me to go ahead with this lecture today itself. But this is a beginning, Mr. Sudheendra Kulkarni. We would like to get more and more associated with you in the university system. We need people of eminence. We need free and liberal thinkers in the country, wherever, maybe from abroad, to come and talk to our students and share their ideas. In fact, Professor Devi was one of the Somaiya public lecture series lecturer. I've invited him. I think she told me, but of course I know him even before that as a teacher. I used to know him. He gave a lecture, and then after a few months, I requested him to come to this university and serve this university. And you heard about something remarkable this university is doing, the School of Civilization. And this particular activity is also conducted by the School of Civilization. I wanted it to be like that. And School of Civilization, and he's also the Dean of Faculty of Humanities and Social Science of the university, and the Director of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, which is a newly restructured unit of the university. Even though he knows about this university, it is customary to say something about the university in all the public lectures. It comes automatically from me as the Vice Chancellor of the university. So, Somaiya Vidya Vihar has a tradition and legacy of 83 years. We celebrated the 83rd Foundation Day last year. We started in 1942 with the primary school in the rural area, and then worked in different perspectives in different parts of in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Gujarat. And in 1960, which is the year we started higher education, the first higher education college, 1960. And 1960, K.J. Somaiya College of Arts and Commerce, Professor Veena Sanekar, a distinguished Marathi literature person, is here. She was in that college, she was the principal. Now she is heading the School of Language and Literature, and also the Dean of Language and Literature of the university. So this is a multidisciplinary, now we are a multidisciplinary university. It is not, of course, when we hear about Somaiya, we hear about Somaiya College of Engineering, Somaiya Institute of Management, all these things. But we are a multidisciplinary university. For example, there is a faculty known as Faculty of Dharma Studies. It deals with Indian culture, Buddhist studies, and also the Jainism studies of Jainism. It is, the faculty is called Faculty of Dharma Studies. The Dalai Lama's organization has instituted a chair in that school. And we teach humanities, social sciences, languages and literature, then basic sciences, engineering, management, everything. Everything is there. There are over 34 institutions, and we have an ecosystem fostering dialogue, fostering maybe critiquing on several aspects, and also programs which are very open in nature. In 2019 only, we got the freedom to become a university. Before that, we were part of the Mumbai University Mumbai University for all our institutions. In 2019, we became a university. It is 5 years old now. And now we have grown like anything. Academically, we have grown like anything. And we look forward to, innovations of, different kinds, unique innovations. We are looking at unique innovations. Of course, we provide the best facilities in sports and recreation. We provide, of course, we have 2 campuses. Of course, some of you may be knowing, of course, Mr. Kulkarni knows it. We have 2 campuses named as Vidya Vihar. This is the campus, and the other is Ayur Vihar. So I used to interpret this Vidya Vihar and Ayur Vihar about the philosophy of this whole Somaiya Vidya Vihar. If we focus on basic education and basic health, the society will become automatically empowered. If you just look at societies all over the world, even the states within this country, you can just see that any state which has focused on basic health and basic education, that society has come up in a significant way. The real empowerment happens. So even in the very name of these 2 campuses itself, they have done it. Padma Bhushan, Sri K.J. Somaiya started these institutions. His son, Dr. S.K. Somaiya, continued the tradition and strengthened the institution. And Mr. Samir Somaiya, current chairman of the overall trust, and also the chancellor of the university. He is very open in interacting, collaborating with institutions, civil society organizations, institutions across the world for strengthening the university system. And this public lecture series is one of the thing which I have started after my joining this institution. And it started with late Professor M.S. Valiyathan. That was the inaugural lecture. I remember he's no more now. One of the very distinguished medical doctors in the whole world who invented the Sri Chitra heart valve and who was the Vice Chancellor of Manipal Academy of Higher Education. He started this lecture series, and then almost every month we have 1 or 2 lectures from people from different knowledge system, different walks of life. It is not just from academics only, maybe from civil society organizations, culture, science, technology, and we want to hear from them what is happening at the cutting edges of knowledges, whether it be interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, and that's the purpose of the overall Somaiya public lecture series. It is really happening in a very big way. Of course, large number of people are watching the Somaiya public lecture series also, even though the physical presence here is not that big. Of course, we are on the YouTube, and this is live actually. Everybody is watching, and if you just look at the observers list, you can see that it's a very, very, very popular activity of the Somaiya Vidya Vihar. Once again, let me, on my personal behalf, welcome Mr. Sudheendra Kulkarni to our midst for the public lecture, and then let me invite him to be with us in this university, helping maybe the creation of knowledge and dissemination of knowledge in his areas of interventions in the years to come. Thank you very much, and let me welcome all of you.
Thank you so much, sir, for those encouraging words and giving the trajectory of what they was. I'll be making the format. So today's speaker is Sri Sudheendra Kulkarni ji. We have been hearing about Kulkarni sir from Professor Devi, Professor Pillai, but he has had an extremely interesting trajectory, personal as well as from professional career perspective. As was mentioned, he started his journey at a political level from the Communist Party of India, Marxist, to eventually moving to the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, in the 1990s and early 2000s, and moving back again to the center. In all of these aspects of his journey, from the CPM, from the left to the right to the center, one set of values and ethics which have been very close to him have been the Gandhian set of values on which he has also written a fascinating book, The Music of the Spinning Wheel. He has been a close advisor and aide to former Prime Minister Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee in his cabinet as well as his Prime Minister's office, and a key strategist for Shri Lal Krishna Advani. He has worked in the capacity of executive editor of Blitz, a very popular weekly tabloid, and has also served as the former chairman of Observer Research Foundation. At the academic level, he played an instrumental role in setting up the China Studies Center in the University of Mumbai. So we are truly glad to have Shri Sudheendra Kulkarni ji amongst us to deliver this talk on a very important issue. Without much ado, I'll invite Shri Sudheendra Kulkarni ji to deliver his talk.
Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Pillai, Honorable Ganesh Devi ji, Dr. Gadgil, and my dear students and teachers at Somaiya University. Namaskar and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Professor Pillai. Thank you, Dr. Devi ji, for this invitation. It's an honor to be invited to speak at this prestigious university. At the outset, I wish to pay my homage to Swargiya Dr. Shantilal Somaiya. He was an industrialist, philanthropist, and educationist of great repute. He was one of the most respected citizens of Bombay. But not many people know that he was also one of the most passionate champions of inter-religious dialogue for peace and harmony in India around the world. I had participated in one such dialogue in this very institution nearly 20 years ago, which he had organized. I'm mentioning this fact, friends, because the subject of my talk today is inspired by this noble aspect of Dr. Shantilal Somaiya, his personality. The way Sri Samir Somaiya and others in his family have carried forward the founder's legacy is truly admirable. They have transformed this institution into a university, much bigger, much better, and much more beautiful. Indeed, every institution that the Somaiya family has built presents a sangam of aesthetics and excellence. You can see this combination at this university as well as at Kitab Khana, which is one of the finest bookstores in the world, and it's my favorite. Friends, I'm going to share with you my thoughts on Asia's responsibility in sharing a better world order in the 21st century. The 21st century has 75 more years left. But how does the world look now that it has entered the 25th year of this century? We must thank Donald Trump for providing the perfect context for examining this question. Let me cite three recent contexts to make my point. First context, please show, yes, you can see it here. I'm sure all of you have seen this unprecedented meeting between two presidents. What a circus Trump and Zelensky performed at the Oval Office in Washington 3 days ago. The guest was disrespectful towards the host, and the host humiliated the guest. And the entire world watched this drama in disbelief. Earlier, Trump had announced that since the United States has given hundreds of billions of dollars in weapons and cash to Ukraine, And therefore, Zelensky must sign a deal to hand over Ukraine's wealth of rare earth minerals to the United States. So, friends, here is the president of a country that first expanded NATO in Europe, bringing it close to the borders of Russia, promised NATO membership to Ukraine, which angered Russia and made it invade Ukraine. Then the United States supplied deadly weapons to Zelensky to fight an unwinnable war for 3 long years against Russia. And now the same United States is telling Zelensky, stop the war and give your rare earths to me. No concern for morality and no concern for international law. Second context. Just a month ago, Trump had announced, with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu by his side, that he was going to take over and own the Gaza Strip and build a luxury resort on a land that belongs neither to Israel nor to the United States, by ethnically cleansing 2 million Palestinians from their own homeland. It is the same land where Israel has conducted a genocide by killing over 50,000 Palestinians, 1/3 of them children and women. And Israel conducted this mass killing by using weapons supplied by the United States. Again, no concern for morality, no concern for international law. Third context. Soon after Trump became president, he had announced that he would take over Greenland from Denmark, and he would make Canada the 51st state of the United States of America. Once again, no concern for morality, no concern for international law. इसे हिंदी में कहते हैं जिसकी लाठी उसकी भैंस. So this is how the world looks when it has entered the 25th year of this century. If the same jungly law, jiski lathi uski bhains, continues for the next 75 years, what will be history's judgment on the 21st century? We must think about it seriously. Friends, I have given these 3 examples just to illustrate something that is well known to each one of you in this hall. The world we live in has entered a period of uncertainty, unpredictability, even instability, and surely a period of turbulence and transformation of a kind not seen in many, many decades. Remember, Trump even mentioned World War III in his spat with Zelensky. This may or may not be an exaggeration, but can we be sure that a new war is not around the corner? When newer, deadlier, and costlier weapon systems continue to be invented, when there is no sign of elimination of nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction, and when big and not so big powers are not setting an example by resolving disputes peacefully. I am reminded, friends, those of you who are students and teachers of literature would perhaps know this. I am reminded here of a line in one of the plays by Anton Chekhov, one of the great Russian writers. A character in Chekhov's play says that if you see a gun displayed on the set in the first act of the play, if you see a gun displayed on the set in the first act of the play, be sure that the gun is going to be used to kill somebody before the play ends. Which means that all these deadly weapon systems that are there, if they are not destroyed, they're going to destroy humanity. That is the lesson of history, and that is the lesson of all great literature. Friends, even though uncertainty clouds many aspects of the future, one thing is already certain. In today's rapidly changing world order, the domination of the West is coming to an end. It is an era that is witnessing the decline of the West and the rise of the rest. You can see this here, friends, decline of the West and rise of the rest. Just look at the contrast between BRICS countries and G7. G7 is the exclusive club of white Western nations. BRICS is more than double, and BRICS is expanding. In the rise of the rest of the world, the most unmistakable phenomenon is the rise of Asia. Asia's share in global GDP has risen, and it is over 54%, much higher than 31% of Europe and North America combined. What it means is that Asia is now regaining its rightful share in world economy. Many of you may have heard the famous British economist Angus Maddison. There's a famous book of his, Contours of the World Economy from the 1st century to the 2030 AD. In this book, Maddison writes, in 1820, China and India contributed approximately 50% of the world's GDP. 50%, just about 2 centuries ago. By 1913, that is less than 100 years after 1820, that share of China and India fell to about 18%. How did this happen? Asia, before the era of European colonialism, was the most prosperous continent in the world. However, colonial subjugation and theft and loot helped Europe grow rich and pushed Asia into poverty, indignity, and despair. Nevertheless, the paradoxical fact is this, friends. Even though Asia's economic power now rising, Asia is still not the political leader of the world, guiding humanity towards a better future. Asia accounts for 59% of the global population, as against the West's 15%. The West accounts for 15% of the world's population, Asia 59%. And yet, even today, Europe and America continue to call the shots that determine the fate of the world. This must change. Asia must come forward and lead the world, which means India among Asian countries must come forward and lead the world. Friends, this brings me to the subject of my talk. Asia's responsibility in shaping a better world order in the 21st century. But we must ask ourselves some questions. Is Asia capable of giving leadership to the creation of a peaceful world? Is Asia capable of creating a future that is more just, more harmonious, more equitable, and more democratic? Is Asia capable of demonstrating a different model of economic development that cares for the environment and the planet's precious biodiversity? Is Asia capable of presenting a new and superior democratic model of politics and governance that gives primacy to the common people and not only to the rich and the powerful? In short, is Asia capable of doing things that Europe and America have failed to do? For this capability to manifest itself, Asia must be first united in thought and action. Asia must rise above its own internal disunity, fragmentation, and disputes, and develop its own distinct identity. In other words, there must be something like an idea of Asia. We all talk about idea of India, but we must think of an idea of Asia that is rooted in ethics and civilizational wisdom. I'm so happy that I'm giving this talk at the invitation of the School of Civilizational Studies. So there's a lot of what I am going to say that has perhaps resonance with what you people have been doing at the School of Civilizational Studies. An idea of Asia that respects its own diversity of religion, race, language, nationality, and yet promotes unity of thought and action. Thought and action among nations and communities to pursue common lofty goals for the good of humanity. Friends, posing the question in these terms might sound utopian, but it is worth remembering that Asia was once audacious enough to dream of a better world, better future for itself and the world. And this happened not long ago, indeed just a century ago, when intra-Asian solidarity had reached peak levels. Many leading lights of Asia not only imagined Asia to be one, but also strove to institutionalize this oneness in some form of Asian confederation. They included prominent political leaders, poets, artists, educators from countries as diverse as India, China, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Turkey, just to name a few. Indeed, undivided India itself played a leading role in the construction of an Asian imagination. Swami Vivekananda, Sister Nivedita, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, Qazi Nazrul Islam, Maharshi Aurobindo, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Rash Bihari Bose, M.N. Roy, Binoy Kumar Sarkar, Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Sarojini Naidu, Biju Patnaik, the list of Indians who saw India's destiny in the larger destiny of Asia and the still larger global destiny, that list is very, very long. And we should really be proud of all the great people who led India's freedom struggle. A fascinating new book, Asia After Europe, Imagining a Continent in the Long 20th Century, explores the theme of Asian unity. It is authored by Harvard historian Professor Sugata Bose. It is an inspiring tale of continental awakening in the 20th century, and that has lessons for the 21st century. I recently reviewed this book at wire.com, and perhaps Professor Pillai saw my review and called me. Friends, I would like to spend some time on this theme of Asian unity, or the idea of Asia, which rose to great prominence in the age of anti-colonial struggles in the first half of the 20th century. It remained influential for some time later in the form of attempts to forge pan-Asian cooperation when Asian countries began to gain independence. Two notable examples of such efforts were the Inter-Asian Relations Conference held in New Delhi in March-April 1947, just a few months before India gained independence, and the Asian-African Conference in Bandung, Indonesia, in April 1955. In the course of these struggles, an idea took shape that may seem unbelievable today. Pan-Asianism, or Asian universalism, became a running thread in the creative imaginings and political actions across the continent, from its easternmost to westernmost edges. Here are a few notable examples. Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das, who presided over the Gaya session of the Indian National Congress in 1922, said in his speech that he envisioned the participation of India in the Great Asiatic Federation. Can you believe this, friends? That there was a time, just about a century ago, when the leading minds of India were thinking of India as a member of the larger Asian Federation. But he is not alone. Netaji Bose, this is Netaji Bose in Singapore, leading the INA, Azad Hind Fauj. Netaji Bose, in a radio address from China on November 20, 1943, said, I quote, I am seized and inspired by the idea of a pan-Asian federalism based on India-China solidarity. Netaji Bose. Then we come to Aung San, who led Myanmar's anti-British struggle for independence. His daughter is the country's pro-democracy leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, now under house arrest, sadly. But her father, Aung San, also evoked the same vision of a pan-Asiatic federation. Next. Here we have S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike, who became Sri Lanka's Prime Minister, participating in the 1947 Asian Relations Conference in New Delhi. He hoped for a federation of free and equal Asian countries. And you can see Mahatma Gandhi's influence on him in this very picture. Next. Li Dezhou, a co-founder of the Communist Party of China and a mentor of Mao Zedong. He allowed himself to entertain the possibility of a United States of Asia. You know, you have United States of America, and here was the founder of the Communist Party of China who had dreamed of a United States of Asia. Next. Sun Yat-sen, a highly respected Chinese statesman who became the provisional first president of the Republic of China in 1911, was a strong votary of greater Asianism. Sun Yat-sen was an ardent admirer of Rabindranath Tagore. As against the Western practice of rule of might, jiski lathi uski bhains, Sun's Asianism was based on the moral principle of the rule of right, not rule of might, but rule of right, which sought, in his own words, a civilization of peace and equality and the emancipation of all races. In contrast, according to Sun, European civilization had become the cult of force, with aeroplanes, bombs, and cannons as its outstanding features, and that has been repeatedly deployed by the Western peoples to oppress Asia. Sun Yat-sen saying this. Then we have Kang Youwei, China's reformist thinker. He's called China's Ram Manohar Roy. Kang visited India twice, first in 1901 and again in 1909. He regarded India as comparable to China, and he observed that India's plight as a colonized country was due to disunity among the different regions and peoples of India. In his book, Kang reinterpreted classical Confucianism to advocate, and these words are important, friends, to advocate abolition of state boundaries to promote global harmony. So radical in their thinking. According to Subhash Chandra Bose, this was Kang's vision of an Asian federation, which would be a stepping stone to global harmony. Today, as we all know, China-Japan political relations are deeply strained. But there was a time at the beginning of the 20th century when many Chinese reformers, including Kang Youwei, stressed the need to emulate China, to emulate Japan. Japan, for many Chinese people, before the Nanjing massacre, to which I come shortly, they really wanted to emulate Japan. And Kang said, I quote, "We Chinese and Japanese are like lips and teeth. We are so close to each other." Friends, the need to distinguish Asia from Europe had gripped great minds all across the continent. Writing in his newspaper, Bande Mataram, Swadeshi leader Aurobindo Ghosh, who later became Maharshi Aurobindo, and I heard just now that you studied Aurobindo, and Aurobindo argued that whereas European democracy emphasized the rights of man, Asiatic democracy based itself on dharma of humanity. Dharma of humanity. Further, Aurobindo asserted that India's freedom was necessary to the unity of Asia. Aurobindo described Asia's role in world history by saying that Asia is the custodian of the world's peace of mind and the physician of the maladies which Europe generates. Profound words. Next. It is worth mentioning here that Xu Fancheng, a great Chinese scholar and yogi, spent 27 years at Aurobindo's ashram in Pondicherry, and he translated many Hindu scriptures into Chinese. Next. Here I would like to mention the great Japanese art critic Okakura Tanshin. Okakura Tanshin first visited India in 1901, and he went to meet Swami Vivekananda. His book, The Ideals of the East, begins with the sentence, "Asia is one." Sister Nivedita, next. Sister Nivedita, a revered disciple of Swami Vivekananda, wrote an introduction to Okakura's book, in which she said, "Asia, the great mother, is forever one." Okakura and Sister Nivedita underscored the fact that what distinguishes Asia from the rest of the world is that Asia is the cradle of the prophets of all the major religions of the world. Friends, none has affirmed this truth more proudly and more forcefully than Mahatma Gandhi. Speaking at the closing session of the Inter-Asian Relations Conference in New Delhi on April 2, 1947, he said, and this is one of the best speeches, greatest speeches that Mahatma Gandhi has delivered. I quote, "The first of the wise men born in Asia was Zoroaster. He belonged to the East. He was followed by Buddha, who belonged to the East. India, in fact, he belonged to India. Who followed Buddha? Jesus, who came from the East. Before Jesus, it was Moses, who belonged to Palestine, though he was born in Egypt. After Jesus came Muhammad." I omit references to Rama and Krishna and other lights of India. I do not call them lesser lights, but they are less known to the West. All the same, I don't know a single person in the world to match these great men of Asia. And then what happened? Christianity became disfigured when it went to the West. I'm sorry to have to say this, but I have to say this, he says. Gandhiji told delegates from 28 countries that, again I quote, "The message of the East, the message of Asia, is not to be learned through European spectacles. It is not to be learned by imitating the tinsel of the West, the gunpowder of the West, the atom bomb of the West. If you want to give a message again to the West, it must be a message of love. It must be a message of truth. There must be a conquest of the West by love and truth. Further he says, Gandhiji says, that this conquest, Asia's conquest of the West by love and truth, will be loved by the West itself. Amazing. In a letter of 14th June 1942 to Chinese leader Chiang Kai-shek, Gandhiji wrote, I long for the day when a free India and a free China will cooperate together in friendship and brotherhood for their own good, for the good of Asia, and for the good of the world. And here we see our two leaders, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Xi Jinping. When Xi Jinping came to India in 2014, they visited Gandhiji's ashram at Sabarmati. I hope that the two leaders remember what Gandhiji had said. Dear students and teachers Somaiya, in their quest for freedom and their heroic struggles against oppressive European rulers, many Asian revolutionaries crisscrossed the continent and found support and asylum in distant lands on the continent. Lala Lajpat Rai, Rash Bihari Bose, M.N. Roy, Tarkanath Das sought shelter in Japan, and so did Sun Yat-sen and others from China. One of the most energetic, globe-trotting Indian intellectuals who traveled extensively in Japan and China in the early part of the last century was Binay Kumar Sarkar. Sarkar regarded China to be India's Masir Bari. It's a Bengali word. Masir Bari, that is home of the mother's sister. Sarkar's writings describe how India enjoyed widespread goodwill all over Asia. Sarkar wanted many Indians to journey across the continent and discover India's bond with Asia. I quote, the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Iranians were all beckoning India, saying, Brother Hindustani, Asia is yours, come. Today, it has become commonplace to acknowledge the decline of the West and the rise of the rest, a theme that Fareed Zakaria elaborated in his 2008 bestseller, The Post-American World and the Rise of the Rest. For those of you who may not know, Fareed Zakaria was born in this very city, Mumbai, and he is now a globally famous journalist in the United States. But how many of you know that Sarkar had made the same prophecy a century ago? Here was his prediction about what Asian nations would achieve after gaining freedom and modernizing themselves. He said, I quote, having acquired new knowledge, the people of Asia will again stride the world as human beings within the 20th century, and they will regain that high status from the 21st century. He had predicted 100 years ago that Asia will rise and Asia will lead the world in the 21st century. Friends, no discussion on Asia, indeed global unity, Asia's unity or global unity, can be complete without listening to the timeless thoughts of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. No, one before this. Yeah. Tagore was a poet of Asia and a poet for Asia. A poet of Asia and a poet for Asia. From Persia to Russia, from Japan to China, Gurudev tirelessly traveled to large parts of the continent, everywhere spreading his message of peace, harmony, and brotherhood. Here he is in Shanghai in 1924. He visited China 3 times, and my friend Saheli tells me that your university wanted to organize a seminar to commemorate the centenary of Tagore's visit to China in 1924. What did Tagore say in Shanghai in 1924 to a large crowd? I quote, "Age after age in Asia, great dreamers have made this world sweet with showers of their love. Asia is again waiting for such dreamers to come and carry on the work not only of fighting, not of profit making, but of establishing bonds of spiritual relationship." Such noble words. Tagore's 3 visits to China left a deep imprint on him. In turn, he left an abiding impression on Chinese people. Next. Inspired by Tagore, Professor Tan Yun Shan, a great Chinese scholar, came to India and became the first director of China Bhavan at Shantiniketan. Next. Liang Chichao, the foremost reformist scholar of China in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, praised Tagore as a visitor who came from a country that was our nearest and dearest brother, India. Please pay attention to these words, friends. Here is one of the greatest thinkers of China. A century ago, he is saying this about India, and he is saying this in praise of Tagore. He says, Tagore as a visitor who came from a country that was our dearest and dearest brother, India. Welcoming Tagore at a reception in Peking, Liang said effusively, again I quote, "Haha, our old brother, affectionate and missing for more than 1,000 years, is now coming to call on his little brother." Here is a Chinese thinker who is saying that Tagore, as a representative of the elder brother, is coming to visit his little brother. A Chinese who is calling his own country the little brother of India. Where have we come in these 100 years? We become enemies. Tagore himself clearly understood both China's civilizational greatness and its potential for spectacular national rejuvenation after it cast off the yoke of imperialism and feudalism. Hence, in Hong Kong, Tagore made a prophecy about the future balance of power in the world. I quote, and please pay attention to Tagore's words, "The nations which now own the world's resources fear the rise of China and wish to postpone the day of China's rise." I repeat, the nations which now own the world's resources fear the rise of China and wish to postpone the day of that rise. Tagore's prophecy is now coming true in the 21st century, with the USA trying its best to contain China and halt its rise. Tagore was equally impressed by Japan. However, he was dismayed by its imperialist ambitions and imitation of Europe in the use of violence. Japan's invasion of China in 1937 shattered the idea of Asia like never before. The Nanjing Massacre, or the Rape of Nanjing, in which Japanese soldiers killed over 40,000 Chinese citizens and raped thousands of Chinese women, remains one of the worst war crimes in human history. This provoked Tagore to tell the Japanese, I quote, "I have deep love for your people, but when as a nation you have your dealings with other nations, you can also be deceptive, cruel, and efficient in handling those methods in which Western nations show such mastery." Tagore, people like Tagore, they were telling things as only true friends can say. He was an admirer of China, but he also told the truth to the Japanese people. The Nanjing massacre had also shocked another admirer of Japan, Subhash Chandra Bose, who, like Tagore, was a strong champion of Asian solidarity. And Netaji says, I quote, "Standing at the threshold of a new era, let India resolve to aspire after national self-fulfillment in every direction, but not at the expense of other nations and not through the bloody path of self-aggrandizement and imperialism." Here Netaji is saying some cautionary words to India itself. I think that these words are very appropriate at a time when some people in India are exactly showing self-aggrandizement and acting like a big brother, not elder brother. Soon after the Nanjing massacre, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose took the initiative to send a medical mission to China as a mark of solidarity with the Chinese people. 5 Indian doctors went as ambassadors of service, goodwill, and love. One of them, Dr. Dwarkanath Kotnis, died in December 1942 while serving Chinese soldiers. He remains an eternal symbol of India-China friendship. And a very famous movie was made by V. Shantaram, Dr. Kotnis Ki Amar Kahani. And Dr. Kotnis remains a hero in China. As you can see, there's a statue of Dr. Kotnis in China. Mahatma Gandhi himself was so deeply committed to Asian unity and peace that in a statement in 1942, he said that if India were to become free, I would have myself gone on a mission to bring peace between China and Japan. Friends, I have spent considerable time showing you the signposts from the 19th and early 20th centuries of Asian unity, Asian solidarity and Asia's noble dreams for the future of mankind. This was the period when Asian countries were fighting against their colonial masters in Europe to win freedom and independence. Sadly, the feelings of mutual affinity and solidarity started to wither away in the post-colonial period. In our own neighborhood, the sentiment of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai did not endure much long after India gained independence in 1947 and China had its communist revolution in 1949. If Japan's invasion of China in 1937 greatly undermined Asian unity, China's war of aggression on India in 1962 produced the same effect. More than 6 decades later, the border dispute between India and China, which triggered the war, remains unresolved. Another tragic event that caused a big crack in Asian unity was India's bloody partition in 1947 with the creation of Pakistan as a separate Muslim nation. It resulted in the killings of 15 lakh people and led to the largest cross-border migration in human history. The same tragic history repeated itself with the partition of Pakistan itself in 1971 and the liberation of Bangladesh. This too was accompanied by large-scale atrocities by the Pakistani army, including rape of thousands of Bengali women in East Pakistan. Till today, India and Pakistan have not been able to peacefully resolve their dispute over Kashmir. And now, India-Bangladesh relations have also worsened. Antagonism between China and Japan, North Korea and South Korea, China and South Korea also are persisting. Disunity in Asia has allowed USA and some of the Western powers to meddle in Asian affairs. Remember how the United States destroyed Iraq on a false pretext that Saddam Hussein had acquired weapons of mass destruction. Remember how the United States destroyed Afghanistan for 20 years after the Soviet Union had done the same earlier. And let's not forget how the United States is arming Israel to destroy Palestinian homelands and frustrate every effort of the United Nations to achieve a two-state solution that would enable both Palestine and Israel to live peaceful side by side. Dear students and teachers of Somaiya University, I now come to the concluding part of my talk. What are Asia's lessons for itself and for the world in the 21st century? How can Asia avoid the mistakes and crimes of the West so that it can shape a better world and a more harmonious world in the 21st century? Let me mention 5 main lessons. The first lesson: move away from exclusive national sovereignty to shared sovereignty. Move away from exclusive national sovereignty to shared sovereignty. Let me explain. The idea of an Asian federation envisioned by many leaders of the anti-colonial struggles in the last century was somewhat idealist, because we are not going to see an Asian Union on the lines of the European Union. That's not going to happen. But blind acceptance of the Western or Westphalian model of nation state has not helped either Asia or the rest of the world. Asia will have to devise innovative ways of international cooperation and dispute resolution based on a new concept of shared sovereignty. For example, the India-Pakistan and India-China border disputes, as also the maritime disputes in South China Sea, can never be satisfactorily resolved without some degree of sharing of sovereignties in contested regions, without compromise and give and take, and without cooperation across borders. Without compromise and without some kind of sharing of sovereignties, these disputes can never be resolved. According to me, my second lesson: Asia must move away from militarist solutions to peaceful solutions to resolve disputes. Rivalry among European nations pushed humanity into the fire of 2 horrific world wars in the last century. Should India and China emulate the same example of rivalry? Can Asia save itself and the world from the calamity of a 3rd world war? Mahatma Gandhi, Tagore, Qazi Nazrul Islam, who is the national poet of Bangladesh, Allama Iqbal, the national poet of Pakistan, Sun Yat-sen, and other leading lights of Asia in the last century had all warned against the imitation of the rule of might practiced by the West. They all had opposed jiski lathi uski bhais method to settle disputes. Therefore, abandoning the militarist path and the militarist mindset also means elimination of all nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, including those built by India itself. Today, sadly, no major Asian country has resisted the temptation of taking to the path of arms race. This has to be resolutely opposed. Third lesson: Asia should move away from narrow Asianism to universalism. Asia's Renaissance has to be different from European Renaissance and America's resurgence. Europe and America cared only for themselves. They did not care for the rest of the world. Asia has to be different. For us, in Asia, our slogan should not be India first, China first, or Asia first. It should be humanity first. This is indeed what the world needs in the age of globalization. Globalization is progressing inexorably in the 21st century. Growing interconnectedness and interdependence among nations and peoples cannot be rolled back. No nation, no region, and no continent can think of its destiny in isolation. Indeed, all the great votaries of Asian solidarity in the last century were simultaneously strong internationalists. They were patriots, but they were also internationalists. in the 21st century, we cannot follow the path of East versus West or South versus North. Rather, Asia must show the path of East plus West plus South plus North. Of course, Antyodaya has to be the starting point of Sarvodaya, which means helping poor and underdeveloped countries in Africa, Latin America, and in Asia itself has to be the main priority of global development. Asia, as the largest continent, has to take the lead in enhancing both intra-Asian and global cooperation for the well-being and progress of entire humanity without any kind of discrimination. And here I must say, larger and richer countries have to bear greater responsibility. Countries like India and China, the large countries of Asia, have to bear greater responsibility in forging such cooperation, even by forgoing some of their own self-interest. The bigger you are, the more generous you must become. The fourth lesson, Asia must move away from profit for the few to prosperity for all and for the planet as a whole. Our world in the 21st century is more prosperous than at any time in human history. This prosperity is mainly created by advancements in science and technology. Asia must set an example of a new path of economic growth that eradicates poverty completely and reduces inequalities besides arresting and reversing ecological degradation. Fifth lesson, Asia must move away from materialist civilization to revival of Asia's civilizational wisdom. Again, a point that has direct bearing on what you people at the School of Civilizational Studies have been pursuing. As Mahatma Gandhi emphasized at the Asian Relations Conference in 1947, Asia's defining identity is that it is a cradle of all major religions and civilizations. The challenge before Asia is how it can resurrect its rich civilizational wisdom and values, that is, love versus hatred, sharing versus greed, cooperation versus confrontation, respect for pluralism versus claims of supremacy, care for Mother Nature versus its reckless exploitation, peace versus violence. These are necessary to reshape its politics, economics, social relations, and thereby show the way to the rest of the world. I'm sure that the Center for Dharma Studies and also the School of Civilizational Studies, which Somaiya University has so proudly started, will promote this enlightened perspective on religion and civilization. Friends, one final observation and I'll be done. For Asia to perform its historic responsibility, India, as the world's most populous nation and the largest democracy, must perform its responsibility. However, sadly, Asian consciousness, Asian identity, and Asian solidarity are very weak today in India. Do we really consider ourselves as Asian? Ask yourself this question, friends. Asian identity and Asian consciousness has become so weak in India today. I sometimes wonder, and I'm speaking quite bluntly here, I sometimes wonder whether India's political elite, business elite, intellectual elite have seceded from Asia and even from our own neighborhood in South Asia. We have so little interaction with our immediate neighbors, be it Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka. Even today, our elite are so besotted with the West that they aspire to sit next to white Europeans and Americans who still dominate the global high table. They feel more at home in America and Europe than in our fellow Asian countries. Sadly, we have come a long way from the future envisioned by our great leaders 100 years ago. But let's take a close look at what is happening in the world, friends. Europe is in steep decline, and it will self-destruct if it continues to be a vassal of the United States of America. Europe has a future only if it turns to Asia. The United States of America is morally, politically, and even economically incapable of leading the world. Therefore, Asia's time has come, which means India's time has come. But is India's elite aware of this? How to rediscover our Asian roots, how to regain our Asian identity, and how to rededicate ourselves to Asia's collective responsibility to shape a better future for the world in the 21st century. That is the first and foremost task before all thinking Indians. Thank you for your patient attention. Jai Hind, Jai Asia, Jai Jagat. So, any questions?
Yes, we'll be taking. Thank you so much for such an intriguing talk. It covered a lot of territory from the perspective of how the idea of Asia developed amongst the leaders of the 20th century, and where should we move forward to, from the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence of Panchashil to the 5 lessons that we need to bear in mind for the 21st century idea of Asian identity. Shogato Bose's book, Asia After Europe, is truly a fascinating story indeed about how you have the philosophies and civilizational conversations which have brought together the idea of Asia, something that needs to be brought back to the public consciousness in India as well as in the other nations. Thank you so much, sir, for such a fascinating talk. We open the session up for a Q&A, questions and answers. So in case there are any questions, we can perhaps take a couple of questions, considering the paucity of time. I'll request our colleague Vivek to.
Very good evening, Professor. My name is Hardi, and my question to you is regarding the last part that you spoke about, that we are missing India as a country with reference to Asian solidarity. However, in recent years, we have seen quite a few infrastructure projects like the Kaladan multimodal project, the moving from look east to act east, neighborhood first. And I completely agree with you when you said about the lesser interactions that we are having with our immediate neighbors, especially in South Asia. So what is the way forward, according to you, to, if I may say, to break these kind of barriers? Because Asian solidarity is something, as a student, I have been studying, and today, somewhere I miss, seeing that, especially, in terms of few of the policies that are being made by the elite. So what is the way forward, sir, according to you, to break this kind of, if I may use the term, a barrier or a hesitation or a hiccup? Thank you.
Very good question. I would say, let's make some small beginnings. What can a university like yours do? Before the function began, we were having a cup of tea with Professor Pillai, Dr. Devi, and he mentioned that the School of Civilizational Studies is undertaking an ambitious project, some 40 volumes, India and the World. I'm sure that Dr. Devi is already considering this, but let us rediscover the great philosophers, the great thinkers of Asia. We don't know enough about Chinese philosophers and some of the names I mentioned in my talk. They're all unknown entities to Indians, even though they held India in such great regard. Do we know anything about them? No. Why is it so? Because our educational system has more or less blacked out China. So, what should be done? Let's get more familiar with the great thinkers, philosophers, poets from Asia, China, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia, which is such a large country. We know very little about Indonesia. Iran, with which we've had such strong and long civilizational ties, just because America threatens us, says, we'll sanction your companies if they do any business with Iran, we keep quiet. We have known Iran much longer than we have known United States of America, Iraq, Jordan, the whole of Central Asia. I mean, Asia is so huge and so rich in its intellectual output. So let's come out of this thinking that all intellectual output has come from the West. Of course, there were great minds in the West also, and we must always recognize them, honor them, and learn from them. But the world is very large. I mentioned to you that China, Asia's population is 59% of the world. The West is 15%. Economically, we are growing fast. But in terms of mentality, we are still not connected with Asia. Can you imagine? We don't have direct flights between India and China yet. India and Pakistan yet. We have our relations with our immediate neighbors, Bangladesh. So I'll restrict my answer just to this one question. Let's have more students from Asia in university like Somaiya. Let's have more teachers from Asia teaching here. And our students and our teachers should go more often to Asian countries and not just to Europe and America.
Yes, about a year back, the School of Civilization, we initiated a concept of studying Asia, because this was at the heart of this civilizational conversation that we wanted to have, wanting the students, the faculty members to get involved. And in December 2023, we had Ashiana, wherein a group of about 35 faculty members and some PhD students on the campus got involved. Each one took the responsibility of studying a particular country, its culture and its trajectories. So there were initiatives. The initiative did not go much beyond, but we have been trying to study it from different perspectives. India and the world is one of those initiatives which we are currently working at. I think Professor Devi wants to speak, so Vivek.
Dr. Kulkarni, this Asiana project, we appeal to about 42 faculty and students to write one little essay on each nation. It failed. It failed. People did not come forward. And I was thinking to myself the reasons for the failure, and I felt that India has, in recent years, gone a long way in spoiling relations with our immediate neighbors. I mean, there's no single country on any side of India which Indians do not hate at the moment. Therefore, I endorse what you said. I'm sorry, this is a reality. I endorse what you say, that the politics of the future will have to be Asian politics, which is politics of love and not of war. I think to be Asian is not to belong geographically to Asia, but spiritually to belong to the side of peace. And therefore, that sentence, the peace of the world, mental peace of the world will come from Asia. So Asia is also a mental location for the rest of the world. I've entirely endorsed what you say. It's a very courageous lecture that you gave in the times when most Indians have learned to hate their neighbors. I think if India can change its attitude, the Asia can then become close and the world will be a better place. Thank you.
Hi sir, Pushottam this side. I want to know that you said that political elites should maintain or bring good relations with the neighboring countries. But what about the status quo that is happening in Bangladesh, if you look in Bangladesh or if you look in Afghanistan? How to tackle that situation, that is status quo that is maintaining here, and neglecting that, and after that creating a bridge between the neighboring countries? You see in Bangladesh also there is a total anarchy, you can say, the Muhammad Yunus what he is doing. So how our political elites can tackle that or use that for maintaining a good or maintaining a body that works for Asia or Asiatic beliefs?
You know, you are right to the extent that there are problems in our own neighboring countries. There is no country in the world without problems. But we should look at these problems in their right perspective. If we look at it only from the perspective of we are right and they are wrong, I don't think we are going to change or improve relations. Take the example of Bangladesh. Since you mentioned Bangladesh, of course, some very bad things are happening in Bangladesh at the moment. But we should be honest in asking ourselves, why is it that a country whose liberation was helped by India went so far away from us? Is there anything wrong that we have done? Shouldn't we be asking this question of ourselves? So, we should be self-critical. The more self-critical we are, the more sincere we are, others will appreciate us. If we take the approach कि सब कुछ आपकी ही गलती है, they may be small, and because they are small, they may not speak very openly all the time. But in the heart of their hearts, they see India as a big brother. You know, I've been to many of these small countries in our neighborhood, and they say that if India acts like an elder brother, we respect India. India should be an elder brother. What is an elder brother in a family? An elder brother in a family is one who cares for all, even by sacrificing his own interests for the good of others in the family. So today, you know, we have become, we think only for ourselves. Pardon me for being frank. This is not how Tagore and Gandhiji and others wanted India to be. Or Netaji Bose. Go back to what I quoted him. Self-aggrandizement. We are seeing so much of self-aggrandizement. Is there any message that India is giving that we care for the rest of our neighborhood? We are behaving like the West. So, of course, we must be very frank in telling our neighbors where they are going wrong. For example, Afghanistan, we all know where they are going wrong. But at the same time, we must have sympathy for Afghanistan for the fact that for 40 long years, they were attacked ruthlessly by one superpower and another superpower. And India, neighbor, we kept quiet. Isn't it our responsibility to see that outsiders don't meddle in the affairs of our neighborhood? Right now, we know what is happening in Gaza. Have we spoken a single word of criticism? You know, the Trump says that we'll build a resort. Uska baap ka hai kya wo? Huh? Whose land is it? Does Israel own that land? Does United States of America own the land? And he says, I'll go and occupy it, own it, and build a resort, and let those 20 lakh people go away from their own homeland. And India is quiet. Vishwaguru. So we must introspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Because of, yes, yes, Professor Pillai has a question. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the illuminating lecture. Very, with courage of conviction, you said it. You mentioned about shared sovereignty. Shared sovereignty, you emphasized that word, those things. Do you have some sort of a recipe for that? Some sort of a recipe for shared sovereignty? Who will share part in?
No, what I'm saying is this. If we look at human history, for several thousand years, we did not have the notion of the kind of nation state that we have today. This concept of a nation state is a very recent one. It came from the West. It's called the Westphalian concept of a nation state with very exact boundaries, with a state that is in complete control of just that territory. Now, this is not how the world has evolved for thousands of years. So in a world, especially in the age of globalization, when we are becoming more and more interconnected, more and more interdependent, we should think of some new ways of resolving problems. So I gave the example of the problem between India and China. We have a boundary dispute which we inherited from the British. Friends, please understand, this boundary dispute, its roots go back to the British era. Neither India is responsible for this nor China. But how can this be resolved? It can only be resolved through compromise. India cannot defeat China, China cannot defeat India in a war. So we should then think of some new ways in which we share the sovereignties in those areas. For example, let me give a very concrete example. We have Tawang. Now, Tawang it's holy for Buddhists, Tibetan Buddhists. Similarly, Kailash Mansarovar, which is now in Tibet, is holy for Hindus. It is there in China, and this one is today in India. Now, can we not have some new understanding where it's easy for us to share? Similarly, Kashmir. Kashmir is a LOC. There is no way India can take over POK, nor Pakistan can take over our part of Kashmir. Even after 4 wars, nothing has changed. Even in the last 11 years of this government it claims itself to be the strongest government. It has not been able to take even 1 square inch of land across LOC. Now, this is a reality. Now, what is the solution? Now, you will probably remember, friends, that the time of Vajpayee ji, Dr. Manmohan Singh, there was a concept of making LOC irrelevant, making it porous, meaning for Kashmiris, for Kashmiri families, divided Kashmiri families across the border, they can go more or less freely and trade freely. And over a period of time, that LOC will just remain on the map, but in reality, we will have some kind of a shared administration. And if this experiment works, maybe tomorrow even the 2 Punjabs, our Punjab and their Punjab, the stubble that we burn here creates pollution there. The stubble that they burn creates pollution in Delhi. No, if this works, then maybe the 2 Punjabs can come closer. The 2 Bengals can come closer. You see, आज पूरे यूरोप में even though we criticize Europe, there are also some lessons to be learned from Europe. After the war, they created a European Union, and without visa, you can go from Portugal to Poland. Why not? That is also some kind of shared sovereignty. Common currency, euro. Euro is a common currency. They have a common parliament. Europe has a common parliament. Now, can we not think on these lines? There's just one last question, Shia.
Sir, thank you for the brilliant talk on this, very historical to contemporary canvas you covered. But I have this idea of new frontiers of conflicts because it is getting very complex, the geopolitics. Especially you talk about Arctic Sea region where 90 billions of LNG projects and of China. Similarly now India is plunging there. So how do you see those conflicts? Because this northern sea route is again a crossroad where China, Russia, India, all three, are equally interested. So how do you see these sovereignties would be clashing there, collaborating, or creating more future conflicts?
Absolutely
Because
right.
it's very complex.
Because these resources, they belong to the entire humanity.
Exactly.
The oceans,
Yes.
the huge mass of snow
Yes.
on both poles, they don't belong to any one country. Just because I am strong and I have the technological power, I have the financial power, and I have the military power,
Yeah.
I cannot just go and grab it. United States saying that the whole of Greenland is mine. And similarly, other countries, as you mentioned, they are now,
Arctic, yeah.
the whole Arctic is
Yeah.
going to be changed forever. It will create environmental disaster.
Yes.
So what I mean is, first, we must strengthen the United Nations. We must strengthen global governance. The same laws should apply to the big as they apply to the small, to the rich as they apply to the poor, which means that be it the United States, China, Russia, or India, we must not take law in our own hands. Which means global governance, because the majority of the countries in the world, they are small countries.
Yes.
Don't they have any right to the resources of the world?
That is all.
So, which means, again, it goes back to the same, that the big countries, God has made some countries big. Why? Just to make them aware that they have a bigger responsibility toward mankind. Not for self-aggrandizement.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I know there will be so many other questions and so many things to ask, and so many actions to be done. Absolutely right, because
I'll only say one thing. I'm so grateful to you for what you said earlier, that I would like to come closer to your university and contribute in whatever little way for making this university a great university. It has great potential because the people who have created it, they were visionaries. Their philosophy is a noble philosophy. So it's not just I was telling my wife as we came here, the campus may be small in size, but if you see the contrast between Mumbai University and Somaiya University, this is so much more better kept, so much more beautiful, it's so much more lively. So I wish you the very best, and in whatever little way, I would like to contribute. Thank you very much.
thank you so much for that gesture. Definitely, sir. Definitely. So thank you so much for the gesture of contributing to the university and shaping its directions in the future. We have come towards the end of this public lecture. I thank one and everyone for participating in it with great enthusiasm. Samir sir, a pillar of support and inspiration as always. Professor Pillai for chairing the session and for interacting with us throughout. And all the faculty members, the Dean of Academics, Professor Narayan Khedkar sir, Professor Okrandhe sir, the Dean of Engineering and Technology, we have Professor Abhay Sardesai, and all the respected faculty members and students who have come together for this session. I also thank the PR and the IT team for their valuable efforts, technical support, which was much needed. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.